Today I'm going to tell you about 38-year-old Isam Nasser's story from Gaza, Palestine. His 11-year-old daughter Nour lost the use of her legs in an explosion 2 years ago, and now depends on a wheelchair to move around. But when their neighborhood became unsafe and the family had to evacuate immediately, Isam faced an impossible choice. The wheelchair couldn't navigate the rough terrain and debris-filled streets they needed to cross. How far would a father carry his disabled daughter to keep her safe? What would you do if your child's life depended on your physical strength alone? Imagine having to choose between staying in danger or carrying your disabled child for kilometers through rubble and broken streets. I know this might break your heart, but imagine if this were your own father facing such a test of love and endurance. Before we continue, please subscribe to our channel so we can keep sharing these important stories from Palestine. How did Isam manage to carry Nour to safety? And what incredible bond did this journey create between father and daughter? Stay with me until the end to find out. 38-year-old Isam Nasser had always been a strong man, working as a construction worker in Gaza City, Palestine. But his real strength came from his love for his family, his wife Layla and their 3 children. Their youngest, 11-year-old Nour, had been the light of his life since the day she was born, a bright and curious girl who loved to dance and run through their small garden. Everything changed 2 years ago when an explosion near their school left Nour paralyzed from the waist down. The doctors at Al-Shifa Hospital had done everything they could, but the damage to her spine was permanent. Your daughter will need a wheelchair for the rest of her life, Dr. Khalil had told Isam and Layla gently. But with the right support, she can still live a full and happy life. Isam had refused to let his daughter's disability defeat her spirit. He spent months learning everything he could about caring for a child with paralysis, converting their home to be wheelchair accessible, and most importantly, ensuring that Nour never felt like a burden or limitation to her family. The wheelchair had become Nour's window to the world. Isam had saved for months to buy her the best one available in Gaza, a lightweight model that allowed her to move around their neighborhood, attend school, and maintain her independence. Nour had adapted remarkably well, even learning to play wheelchair basketball with other children at a local sports program. Baba, Nour would tell Isam as he pushed her wheelchair through the streets, I may not be able to walk, but I can still see everything beautiful in the world. And I have the strongest Baba to take me anywhere I want to go. Isam's love for Nour had made him creative in ways he never imagined. He had built ramps throughout their house, modified their bathroom, and even created a special table where Nour could do her homework at the perfect height for her wheelchair. If this story is already touching your heart as a parent, please give it a like. Can you imagine adapting your entire life to ensure your disabled child feels loved and capable? Let's continue with Isam's incredible test of paternal strength. November 15th started as a normal day in the Nasser household. Isam had gone to work at a construction site, Layla was preparing lunch, and Nour was in the courtyard practicing her wheelchair basketball skills, throwing a small ball into a makeshift hoop that Isam had installed for her. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, everything changed. Explosions began echoing through their neighborhood, and within minutes, their area was declared unsafe for civilian families. Emergency announcements urged all residents to evacuate immediately to safer locations at least 3 kilometers away. Isam rushed home from work to find his family in a state of panic. We have to leave right now, he told Layla as he surveyed their situation. They're saying everyone needs to get to the community center on the other side of the district. The problem became immediately clear. The route to safety was through streets filled with rubble, broken concrete, and debris that made wheelchair navigation impossible. Even if the wheelchair could handle the rough terrain, it would be too slow for the urgent evacuation that was needed. Nour looked at her parents with understanding beyond her 11 years. Baba, she said quietly, my wheelchair can't go through all that broken street, can it? Isam knelt down beside his daughter's wheelchair, his heart breaking as he realized what they would have to do. Nour, my brave girl, Baba is going to carry you. We're going to leave the wheelchair here, and I'll make sure you get to safety. But Baba, Nour said, worry filling her eyes, it's so far. I'm too heavy for you to carry all that way. Isam looked into his daughter's concerned face and made a promise that would test every limit of his physical and emotional strength. Nour, my precious daughter, you could never be too heavy for your Baba's love. I carried you when you were a baby, and I'll carry you now when you need me most. The decision was made quickly. Layla packed essential items in a small bag, while Isam prepared to carry Nour on his back for the 3-kilometer journey to safety. They had to leave the wheelchair behind, the symbol of Nour's independence and mobility that had taken months to afford. Isam knelt down and helped Nour climb onto his back, positioning her carefully so she would be secure and comfortable for the long journey ahead. At 11 years old, Nour weighed about 40 kilograms, not impossibly heavy for a short distance, but a significant load for a 3-kilometer trek through difficult terrain. Hold on tight, my darling, Isam told his daughter as they prepared to leave their home. Baba's going to take you on the longest piggyback ride of your life. The first kilometer was manageable. Isam's construction work had kept him physically strong, and his determination to protect Nour gave him energy he didn't know he possessed. Nour held on carefully, occasionally asking, Baba, are you okay? Do you need to rest? But as they entered the second kilometer, the weight began to take its toll. Isam's back started to ache, his breathing became labored, and sweat poured down his face despite the cool November weather. The streets were crowded with other evacuating families, making progress slow and difficult. Other parents, seeing Isam carrying his disabled daughter, offered to help. Brother, let me carry her for a while, said Abu Mahmoud, a neighbor who was evacuating with his own family. You need to rest. But Nour shook her head firmly. Thank you, uncle, but I want to stay with my Baba. He's the strongest man in the world, and he promised to carry me all the way. Isam felt his daughter's faith in him, and it gave him strength to continue. We're doing this together, Nour. Baba and his brave girl. When will communities have accessible evacuation plans that ensure disabled individuals can escape danger with dignity? When will emergency procedures include provisions for families with special needs? Every child, regardless of physical ability, deserves emergency support that doesn't depend entirely on their parents' physical strength. Halfway through the second kilometer, Isam had to stop for his first real rest. His legs were trembling, his back was screaming in pain, and he wasn't sure he could make it the remaining distance. He gently lowered Nour to sit on a broken concrete block while he caught his breath. Baba, Nour said, looking up at her father's exhausted face, maybe we should ask someone for help. I don't want you to hurt yourself because of me. Isam knelt down beside his daughter and took her hands in his. Nour, my beautiful girl, carrying you isn't hurting me. Leaving you behind would hurt me. Not being able to protect you would hurt me. But carrying you to safety? That's what fathers do for their children. As they rested, other evacuating families stopped to check on them. Ahmad, an elderly woman who knew their family, sat down beside Nour and said, Your Baba loves you very much, little one. Not every father would be so strong and so determined. I know, Nour replied with a smile. That's why I'm not worried. My Baba always keeps his promises. After 10 minutes of rest, Isam lifted Nour back onto his back and continued their journey. The third kilometer was the most challenging yet. Isam's construction worker strength was depleting, and every step required conscious effort and determination. But something remarkable happened during that final kilometer. Other evacuating families began walking alongside them, offering encouragement and support. Children walked beside Isam, talking to Nour to keep her spirits up. Adults shared their water with both father and daughter. Uncle Isam is showing us what real love looks like, one teenager told his younger brother as they walked together. Look how he's taking care of his daughter. Nour, feeling the support of the community around them, began to sing softly to help her father maintain his rhythm and pace. She sang traditional Palestinian songs that her grandmother had taught her, her sweet voice providing a soundtrack of hope for their difficult journey. Sing louder, Nour, called out a young mother who was carrying her own toddler. Your voice is helping all of us stay strong. Can you imagine the power of a community coming together to support a father carrying his disabled daughter to safety? Can you imagine if your own neighbors walked alongside you during your family's most difficult moment? This is when Isam's story becomes not just about paternal strength, but about the extraordinary support that emerges when people witness true love in action. As they approached the final stretch of their journey, word of Isam's 3-kilometer trek with Nour on his back had spread among the evacuating families. People who had arrived at the community center earlier began walking back toward them, creating a welcoming committee for the father and daughter who had become symbols of determination and love. When Isam finally reached the community center, his legs gave out and he collapsed to his knees, gently lowering Nour to the ground. His back was in agony, his clothes were soaked with sweat, and his hands were shaking from exhaustion. But his daughter was safe. The crowd that had gathered around them began to applaud, not just for Isam's physical accomplishment, but for the demonstration of paternal love they had witnessed. Dr. Sarah, a physician who was volunteering at the evacuation center, immediately came to check on both father and daughter. Mr. Isam, she said as she examined his back and checked his vital signs, what you did today was extraordinary. You carried your daughter 3 kilometers through the most difficult conditions. Most people couldn't have done what you just accomplished. But Isam, still catching his breath, looked at Dr. Sarah and said simply, She's my daughter. Any father would have done the same thing. Nour, sitting beside her exhausted father, took his hand and said, Baba, you're my hero. Not because you carried me, but because you never made me feel like I was too heavy or too much trouble. You made me feel like I was precious cargo that you were proud to protect. The story of Isam's 3-kilometer journey spread quickly through the evacuation center and beyond. Within days, Palestinian communities around the world had heard about the father who carried his disabled daughter to safety, and the response was overwhelming. A Palestinian businessman living in Germany heard about Nour's lost wheelchair and immediately arranged to have a new, advanced wheelchair shipped to Gaza. A Palestinian medical organization offered to provide Nour with physical therapy and mobility training. Families throughout Gaza began donating money to help the Nour family rebuild their wheelchair-accessible home. But perhaps most importantly, Isam's journey had inspired changes in emergency evacuation procedures throughout Gaza. Community leaders began developing plans to ensure that families with disabled members would have appropriate transportation and support during future emergencies. Today, 6 months after that 3-kilometer journey, the Nour family has not only recovered from their evacuation experience but has become advocates for disability rights and emergency preparedness in their community. Nour now has a state-of-the-art wheelchair that can handle various terrains, and she has become a spokesperson for children with disabilities throughout Gaza. She often speaks at schools and community centers about resilience, family love, and the importance of never giving up. Isam has worked with local emergency services to develop evacuation protocols that include provisions for disabled individuals. His experience carrying Nour has led to the creation of specialized emergency equipment and training for first responders who assist families with special needs. The journey that tested Isam's physical limits has become a source of strength and purpose for the entire family. Nour often tells people, "The day my Baba carried me 3 kilometers wasn't the day I felt most disabled. It was the day I felt most loved and most capable of overcoming anything." Isam continues his construction work, but now he also volunteers with organizations that build accessible infrastructure throughout Gaza. Every ramp he constructs, every accessible bathroom he installs, is a tribute to his daughter and all the children who deserve to navigate their world with dignity and independence. When will all communities have emergency plans that ensure no parent has to carry their disabled child for kilometers to reach safety? When will accessibility be built into every aspect of community planning, including disaster response? Every family with special needs deserves emergency support that recognizes their specific requirements and provides appropriate assistance. If you believe that fathers like Isam should never have to carry their disabled children for kilometers to reach safety, if you believe that emergency evacuation should include accessible transportation for all family members, please like this video so this story of paternal strength and community response can reach people who can make a difference. Right now, thousands of people are watching this story of a father's incredible physical and emotional strength. Let's make sure Isam's message, that love gives us strength we didn't know we possessed, and that communities must support families with special needs, reaches every corner of the world. Can you imagine if your own father had to carry you for 3 kilometers to keep you safe? Can you imagine if your family's safety depended on one person's ability to physically transport everyone to safety? Think about the families with disabled members in your community. How many might need special consideration during emergencies? Every like, every comment shows that families like the Nours and fathers making extraordinary physical sacrifices are not forgotten. If you believe that paternal love can overcome any obstacle and that communities should support families with special needs, leave a Palestinian flag emoji in the comments. Subscribe to our channel to show that you stand with parents who go beyond human limits to protect their children. Tomorrow we'll bring you another story that will remind you of the incredible lengths parents will go to ensure their children's safety and dignity. Don't miss it. Subscribe so we can continue sharing these important stories of parental determination, community support, and hope from Palestine. Will you share a prayer for families like the Nours and all the parents caring for children with special needs in the comments? They need our recognition, our support, and our commitment to creating accessible communities and emergency procedures that ensure no child's safety depends solely on their parents' physical strength. Note, the names mentioned in this story have been changed for privacy purposes. This story is inspired by real events experienced by families with disabled children and communities working to improve accessibility and emergency preparedness in Palestine.